Welcome back to Michiana Mainlines. Today we're finally going to get around to doing that Chicago South Shore and South Bend Railroad freight in the streets of South Bend, Indiana video that we've been talking about for a long time. This is going to kind of cover the line as it came into town down Orange Street and down LaSalle Avenue. We're going to do it in two parts. This one is going to look at the freight, and then we'll do a separate one on the passenger. This will kind of cover South Bend, Indiana area, the Bendix Spurs, Orange and Mary Avenue, and Colfax Avenue. So without further ado, let's continue here. Here's a pretty good overview map. This is from Ton's Railfan Guides. And this kind of shows some pretty good detail of the South Bend area for those that aren't familiar with the area. And it's kind of good enough for our purposes. Basically, here on the west, you see the South Shore line labeled pretty well as it comes into town. This is the current alignment here that goes up to the airport. We have a couple videos that talk in detail about that. But today we're going to be concerned about the part that kind of paralleled the New York Central, went by the Bendix plant, and then came down Orange Street, down Colfax, and then back up to LaSalle Avenue, and finally where it terminated at Hydraulic Avenue after crossing the river. And we'll be looking at all the freight on this, and we're going to go into a little bit more detail because this map don't show, but down here near Olive Street, there was also an appendage that came down and went to quite an industrial area right in here. So we're going to kind of look at that over here too. So the next slide here, we're going to kind of look at the West End here again. This shows a little bit more detail with labelings for freight customers. This is an old map. Most of these maps we're going to look at here were from around the 1960 period, but we do have one later that's even older. But this will pretty much be the foundation. Again, here now we kind of see Grandview would be right back in here. Here's the line that went up westmore to the airport. But here we see the whole Bendix area, and there was an awful lot going on in this area. Not only did the South Shore go into the Bendix plant, they also had quite a few sidings, and that was kind of their fiddle yard for everything they needed to do around South Bend. Now, another thing here to note is you'll see this kind of north-south line here, and these aren't any kind of a scale, so this stuff is exaggerated. It's not really the way things were laid out, but it does show this New York Central line coming in. This is a track that came in off of the New York Central and was later used by Penn Central and Conrail, where they interchanged with the South Shore, and they also came in and had their own business within Bendix, bringing coal and such. And we'll have a few shots that will look at that. Here's kind of where the South Shore station was located when they moved it out of downtown South Bend, and the Amtrak station is now in this area here. But these numbers, we're not going to go into all these industries, but I'll just give a little bit of a sampling here. Number 867, which was here, was the old main line relocation in 1931. See that here now we had the new alignment for the South Shore, but it was actually moved way back when. We also have Cayley Interchange, Winkler's Crossing, which is probably what they called where the New York Central actually crossed the South Shore. See, the New York Central main would have been back in here. And then, of course, Bendix Corporation and Siding. Up next here, here's a shot from Jeff Strombeck, 1977. That's at Grandview Avenue. That would be kind of looking to the northeast there, and that was one of the 800 units. I always called those Little Joes, and I still do because that's the name that stuck with me as a kid. But the South Shore referred to them as 800s, and that's a quick way to get South Shore aficionados upset if you call these Little Joes, because they didn't refer to them as that. Next up here, here's a good overview of the big Bendix complex. This was probably back in the 1960 time period. Here we see the New York Central line is kind of this dim line, and then we see the South Shore Main and all the sightings that were here. Up next to kind of look at that Bendix area today, much different. Many of the Bendix buildings have been removed, and you just see a lot of car storage going on here on the South Shore. This is all the South Shore track here, and the interchange with Norfolk Southern has been removed, so there's no interchange going on here anymore at this time. Of course, Bendix Drive came through this area as well. Here's another shot over here, kind of looking a little bit further east here. And I kind of marked in red. This is where the sighting came off of the New York Central and crossed the South Shore Main and then went into the yard area. And they also had a track that went into Bendix. Here is the present Amtrak station here. We'll be looking at that area a little bit more later. And the Amtrak platform. That switch came off just a little bit to the west of the Amtrak platform. Here's a shot of a Conrail locomotive working in that yard area. Now right here we see the Conrail main ex New York Central. And here you can see this interchange track that branched off from the Conrail and then crossed the South Shore. Now, it's kind of a neat thing that they had here. You can kind of see them a little bit in this picture, but you'll see a little bit of this swinging gate here. There was one on each side, and what that was a manual gate that would block one of the tracks, which wasn't being used. So in other words, the South Shore would always be in the position to block Conrail when the South Shore was using it, and vice versa. And it even had a warning light on there as well. And you see a lot of the Bendix complex in the back. I believe this area here is where coal hoppers were emptied. I think there was even a car shaker. Moving right along here, this is a view from the South Shore track looking at that interchange track, and here you kind of see this gate real well that is swung over to block the South Shore Main as the Conrail is utilizing it. Here's some pictures from the past, a great Sandy Goodrick photograph of that general area with the old electric box cabs. Those were used by the South Shore pretty much into the late 70s when the locomotive fleet for freight was replaced with diesel units. But these were still quite common into the 70s. Another look here, same area, different locomotives, but again, that's the South Shore track and Bendix plant in the background, a Dennis Schmidt photo from 1965. This is an older overview looking at that same area again, but we're moving a little bit farther to the east. Here we have Bendix Drive, and we'll be getting into more detail here of how things worked. The line kind of split into two branches here where the South Shore came past. This is where the present day station is around here today. But the line basically went down Orange Street here and eastward. But there was also a segment that came down just south of Washington and then crossed Olive Street and went into a big industrial area back here. And that street it went down was called Mary Avenue. And that was removed in the early 70s. We'll look at that here in a little bit. But up next, here's another zoom in of this area in question that we're talking about, the Orange Street and then the split coming down. Again, New York Central is the main line here, and this is Meade, probably pre-1970s. Of Current Mead and Bendix intersection. This is the present day Amtrak station. Here you kind of see what's left of the track that went down to Mary Avenue. This continued southeast. And the main track that went into downtown South Bend for passenger came right through here, right down Orange Street, which at that time was a dirt street. Now it's a 4-lane, almost a major type highway, really. Next up here, we're going to take a look at a video clip. This is from the NEF video called The South Shore in the 1970s. This is courtesy of Green Frog Productions, who now has the rights to this video. And this is kind of in the area where the present day Amtrak station is, and looking west. Very good shot there. That was one of the freights coming in from the east. Now again, we'll have another look here at this area, just showing a little bit closer here how the track was lined up, where we had the line that came down heading toward Mary Avenue, which was back in here, and then the main line coming down Orange, and we also had a spur, which we'll get to all that in a little bit. But one of the main things about this is it gets pretty confusing. There was an awful lot of freight business on this line, and that's one of the main takeaways really from all the branches that we've been examining, how much business there was back in the day. But things have changed, and now all of that is pretty much gone. Here again is a look at that track where it ended at Mead Street, which would have continued and then headed toward Olive and Mary Avenue. Here's a look at Olive Street, and this is kind of looking southward. It would have been in this direction, but here's kind of the area where the track came through and crossed Olive. You could still see here, if you look very close, some embedded rail in the pavement. And then Mary Avenue ran right through here. Next up, same area here again. This kind of gives a real good look at this Mary Avenue that we were talking about. Here's Olive Street running north and south. Here's Washington. And Mary Avenue came right straight down through here, and then went eastward, and the South Shore line came right down Mary Avenue and then went down into that industrial area. This was a pretty big neighborhood in this area, and then the urban renewal took all this out, and then it's industrial and open spaces now, and there was even a lot of more business back in this area, which we will see. But right now we're going to concentrate on this Olive Street area here, right where the track was. Here's a look at the Mary Avenue neighborhood. Here we have Olive Street, and then looking down Mary Avenue, this would be looking southeast. And you can see there was a lot of properties in here, 34 properties, and then the South Shore line ran right straight through here down Mary Avenue, and then crossing Grant Street and into that industrial area. Just imagine what it would be like standing here at Olive Street and looking down Mary Street back in the day. Well, we're able to do that. Here's standing at Olive Street, 1960, Victor A. Beard collection, and we see box cab 704 making a freight move down Mary Street. This is Washington Street running here. And notice how this building is almost just shoehorned in here to fit. Kind of like the things we do on our model train layouts, and we think, oh man, that's not prototypical or realistic, but look at this now. And also notice kind of the front of this building, how it's kind of oddly angled in all directions. Here's a look at that area now, same shot basically, and I just find it interesting to note that this fence Almost kind of has the same proportions that that building had. So now let's look at all that stuff that was in that area past Mary Avenue. And you could see there was just a whole lot of stuff over here. Whole lot of industrial sightings and different customers. Also to note here is you'll see this New York Central coming through. This was another New York Central spur that came off of the New York Central main line and went right down Grant Street and crossed Washington to get into what was later O'Brien Paint, and we'll see a little bit of that later. But just to hit some of the main customers here, at 876 we had a New Way Coal, Hurwich Iron, of course, had a bunch of activity here. Buter Acton Coal, Team Track, Haverstock Manufacturing, Cremo Bread. There was a freight house, which we'll see a clipping about that here shortly. White Star Oil, Circle Lumber and Fuel, and Donahue Coal. And that's just to name a few. We're not going to try to cover all of this. Up here at Orange Street, that was the O'Brien Royal Adhesive Spur. We'll look at that separately. And we also want to note here the Michigan Central that headed up and eventually to Niles, Michigan. That came through this area here as well, and we'll see that shortly in a photo. This was a clipping from December 1929, the South Shore, the Shorelines paper. This talks about the new freight terminal being put into that area there, which was basically that area we looked at there near Grant Street. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. You can freeze it if you want and magnify it or whatever you got to do if you want to read it. But that's just kind of interesting. That's when it was just being planned because there was another freight house in another location. Now looking at this area again, kind of in its heyday, here we see Washington Street again. Here's that Grant Street where the New York Central spur ran up. And here's the track coming, the South Shore track coming in and ending up in a bunch of sidings here. Also, here's this Michigan Central again that went to Niles, and we see that coming down. And it's interesting to note here, you can see where it had a diamond and crossed the New York Central. That's something that was gone in later years when Conrail still operated that line to haul coal to Notre Dame. I believe that probably was done away with sometime in the 70s, because all that remained in the final days was this curve portion here, which came to a switch near Cherry Street, which was Cherry Street switch. And now the stark reminder of what that whole area looks like today. All of those customers and all of those tracks, and now all we're left with is the double track Norfolk Southern. That's just a great testimony to the way things changed from the single car dock loading to now the point A to point B and through traffic of today's railroads. And of course, trucks had a lot to do with eliminating a lot of that short haul business too. But now it's all long haul, and the Rust Belt conditions of this area, where we're more of a service industry than manufacturing like we used to be. But that's kind of an interesting before and after. Now here's that Grant Street again, just to take a quick look for kicks. This would be Washington Street looking south, and you still see some rail embedded in Grant Street going to the south. But this whole area back here is where all that South Shore tracks would have been, and those sidings. And now we'll also look here a little bit. Like I say, this gets confusing, but now we're going to kind of jump up here, take a more of a look here. Here was that Mary Street thing again, but now this is kind of the main track going down Orange Street. But there was also other activity in here just south of Washington. We had Peterson Coal, New Way Feed, another team track, another freight depot. That might have been the one that was replaced by that new one the article talked about. I'm not sure. and Superior Coal. And again, this is about 1960. And we also see the siding that went to New Way and Crossed Olive. We'll talk more about that later. Here's that old map from 1920 where this showed even more stuff. Here was Olive, here was Orange, and the New Way area had even other things in it. It had the trailer pits, a freight house, a team track, so a lot more even at that time period. Now I'll get into some pictures here. Here's a John Strombeck photo. This was from 1962, if I'm reading that right. But that's Olive and Orange. Olive crossing here. Here's Orange looking east, and somewhere back in here would have been the New Way feed spur, which was still in place into the late 60s or so. I still remember seeing that as a kid. Here's a shot from Mike Palmitter, 1964, Olive at Orange, and that's a freight working the New Way spur. This, of course, Olive Street looking to the southwest. This would be Orange here where the car is driving. But that's an interesting photo. I still remember as a kid that spur being there. Another shot in that area on Olive Street and Orange with the old box cabs. Here you can get a good look at, you can see some of the rail of the New Way spur in the background. Another great shot, also crossing gates at Olive. And as I recall, the unique thing about their crossing gates were they were the orange painted South Shore color, not the normal black and white that the freight railroads would use. But here again, look, that's looking east, and you kind of see that New Way spur back here in the background. That, of course, is now fire station property back there now, which we will see. Another shot here. This was at Huey and Orange from AmericanRails.com, an N.M. Burns photo. A great shot there. Yep, Orange was just a dirt street back in the day. It had curbs, but not paved, and just basically a two-lane street. Here's a good look at Olive and Orange, what it looks like today. Looking east, no track, no dirt streets, and not even as many houses. Now we're going to continue moving eastward down Orange Street as we go by some more industrial areas. Here we have Brookfield Street, north and south here, Johnson Street, and the big complex of the Royal Adhesives, and then later O'Brien Paint. I think even Uniroyal had a presence in there at one point, but there was a lot of freight activity for the South Shore on the north side of this complex. Here's a shot of a very good shot, boy, where we're getting the freight and passengers, so we get to use this picture for both of the videos. But that's a Roger Apuda photograph from 1964, Royal Adhesive O'Brien. And here you see the box cab locomotive working that siding along the plant, where I recall boxcars being left there as a kid in the late 60s, but I'm sure they probably took other freight as well. And of course, a passenger coach also coming by. Here again, working that spur, how it went off to the side of the building. And this is kind of what it looks like here today. You can kind of see the brickwork where loading doors were patched off. That probably was one of the boxcar loading docks, which was later redone and patched. Also interesting to note that the bike lane almost pretty much lays out where the freight spur was. So continuing where we were here, this is Royal Adhesives that we just looked at, and then of course the line continued down Orange Street. It kind of made a curve and was just kind of a regular non-street running track, and then it went on to Colfax, again broke off, and then ended up crossing LaPorte Avenue and down LaSalle Avenue down to the terminus at the yards. We're only going to concentrate up to LaPorte Avenue because that's pretty much where the freight stopped. But we still did have a complex there. This going back into the 60s kind of shows this. Well, it's not very good quality, but they didn't have the photography capabilities we have now. But you see the track coming down Orange, and then where it just kind of ran through neighborhoods to get to Colfax and then eastward. And now looking at this present day here, the new Orange Street, wide, multi-lane, but it does kind of line up pretty well, which where the track actually ran. Here's a shot of a freight train coming onto Colfax Street. This would have been heading westbound, Harry Zilmer from the 1960s. Another shot here of coming on to Colfax. And now looking at more detail at that area, when the track left Colfax, it came through what is now an urban renewal area and then went down LaSalle. But this whole area here was an industrial area, which we will see. Here's a look at the map for that area. Now we see right before LaPorte area, we had the Cummins siding, Central Roofing, and Weisberger Brothers. I still remember freight cars being left at that building probably in the late 60s. So let's take a bit of a closer look at that now. We can see Colfax Avenue here, and we can see how it used to look back in probably the 60 time period. Here's where the new street and neighborhood is at, but we see the old industrial complex, and there was quite a bit there. Another zoom-in view of that same area, showing quite a bit of area there. There were several tracks here, a couple sightings. We'll see that shortly. Here's a 1946 George Usher. This will also be shown on the passenger video, but this will be kind of a sneak preview for you for that video. But just so we could see all the track that was in that area by Cummings complex. You could see the complex back there and a couple of sightings. And take note of this house right here. We look at the present day now, we see things look a whole lot different. That's now a street. This is where Cummings was. But look at that house. It sure kind of looks like the same house to me. I think that's pretty cool. Just think of all the things that house has seen if it could only talk. All the railroad stories it could tell. And then we come to the end of street running in South Bend for the South Shore. This was a South Bend Tribune picture. Looks like July 22nd, 1970. Rails being removed from the street. There's pavement, so it's probably either Colfax or LaSalle Avenue. I'm not sure which, but pretty much when the station was moved to the Meade Street area, no time was wasted in removing the rails. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Here's a couple sites I'm just putting out there if you're interested in the South Shore, particularly if you're not very familiar with it. The mysouthshoreline.com is a good site, southshorelinemuseum.org. And I want to mention the greenfrog.com again. They were very kind in letting us use that footage. And those videos are still for sale. They have several videos on the South Shore that you can purchase, as well as many videos that cover this local region here, as well as the entire country, coast to coast. So if you're not familiar with Green Frog, Definitely check them out for your railroad video needs. I would assume that most rail fans would be very familiar with Green Frog, but if you're not, it's definitely worth a check out. And as usual, thanks for watching. Don't miss the other videos of the Chicago South Shore and South Bend. As I mentioned, the spur to the airport, we have two parts on that. One just looking at the freight, which is now no more, and the other looking at the passenger, which may not be long for this world either, as there's talk of getting to the airport by a quicker route from the west, so we still have to stay tuned for that. But those are definitely worth looking at, and we have other things coming. We're going to be doing a video on the South Bend to Niles, focusing on the French spur just south of Niles, Michigan. We had some requests for that because we kind of just broad brushed it when we did some of the other videos on that line. And we're going to have even more coming on South Bend to Niles. We're going to have, it's almost like a investigation here where we're getting new videos and new pictures and new maps. And as long as we got more to put out there, we're going to put it out. So anyway, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. We'll see you later.